Hi, hello, and welcome back to Everso. I'm Ever, and this will be the reading of a fic titled Like a Dying Houseplant by BLADESANDPEACE on AO3. Summary. Zuko didn't vision much because he could see how ugly and incomplete she was now, beneath the makeup and the flames and the orders. Everyone was still afraid of her. That's why she's restrained and dirty and hardly gets any sunlight, like a dying houseplant. Then, why did she fail? It must have been her mother. She must have secretly spoke to Zuko through secret letters and codes because he was the good son and could still be saved. Because Azula needed to go down and bring the badness with her. Ursa must be proud of her good boy. So she should haunt his days instead of hers, because Azula had never been her mother's girl. The Fire Nation had ruled over all the other nations for decades, as the most capable and feared empire in more than 100 years, conquering kingdoms as if it were their divine right. They were made to think so. Their propaganda was fairly impressive, with all of them believing their nation to be righteous and unstoppable against their varying enemies and colonies. Burning everything from the ground up as if it meant nothing to them, it was classified as collateral damage in the name of a greater good. Fire Lord Ozai had been on top of that adoration once. They saw him as a god, a great hero who would do anything for his people, and who would show their greatness to the rest of the world, and so would his daughter, who had already done it. She'd infiltrated the most unbreakable kingdom of them all, the Earth Kingdom, and brought it to its knees. This impressive feat granted her the royal throne despite it being the second-born, because the firstborn son was nothing more than a traitor. The day she had been waiting for had come, her long-awaited coronation. Her father would soon be empowered by Thousand's comet and become emperor of all nations by defeating their last enemy. And she would finally have what she deserved as the true heir to the royal throne. She would govern her nation with pride and go down in history as an exceptional ruler. And then, silence. Her destiny had been crushed by none other than the son her father nearly disowned. She found it to be extremely unfair, but that's the polite version of it. Had it been up to her, she would have used more colorful language to convey her anger. Although she wasn't the kind of girl that was familiar with such a way of speaking, she liked to use important words in a sweet tone that would make people think that she knew more than anyone else in the room, even when the subject at hand wasn't her forte. Yet, the straitjacket on her is as real as her dethronement. It wraps around her harshly, form-fitting to the point that it could suffocate her if she breathed for too long. But the institution isn't designed to be comfortable. So the staff don't focus on that too much either. She is fairly certain that if the new Fire Lord hadn't ordered them to take care of her, she'd probably have been murdered a long time ago. How merciful is he? And that makes him weak, unfit. Everyone in their family would think that, down to the great-great-grandfather who started the war with the imperialist views. But now, they all been disgraced by the current ruler. She can hear them rolling in the graves. The disrespect! Oh well, it's not like anyone's going to listen to her now. She isn't the princess of anything anymore. It feels wrong. because only a few months before the war ended, she was formally crowned Fire Lord. Fire Lord Azula sounded really nice, as if it was everything she had ever wanted and more. And then they took it away from her, after she molded herself and let herself be molded into the perfect weapon. It still wasn't enough. Her father favored her, but cast her aside anyways, because even though he wouldn't fight by her side, he'd given her a nation to rule. He would end up ruling over all of them anyway. But when her brother woke up one day and decided to embarrass her to death because she'd won too much and lost too little, her uncle would probably agree, because she didn't die, which is arguably worse. She won't go down in history as a ruler or even martyr of the old reign. She is alive. She breathes in air and hates it. She's plagued by shocks and flashbacks of moments she would much rather erase from existence altogether. She cannot help sleep, because visions of her mother keep her awake until the world feels like it's punishing her again. The worst thing is, the flickering image of Ursa doesn't look disappointed in her as Ozai would have been. Instead, she almost looks pitiful. The realization makes her scream sometimes, makes her yell that a traitor to the nation has no right to look at her that way, much less feign sympathy. She only stops when men and women hold her back, stuffing her mouth with something so the nut house can seem somewhat manageable, while electricity runs from her brain to the rest of her limbs. It's in these moments that her mind quiets down the slightest bit, when she's brought back to the palace gardens as she watches Tylee cartwheel while Mai seems to have the tiniest bit impressed, not because she's doing it wrong, it's just all Mai can show. And then Azula wants to try too, wants to be better than Tylee and push her when she falls, but she doesn't get to, because that child is no more. And though Azula can smell the fire lilies, the neatly cut grass, and the undeniable smell of childhood, she is not there. As the memory fades, when the white starts to bleed into the old pictures too much, she recalls her flames used to be blue back then too. She can't pinpoint exactly the moment they had settled into the palms. She remembers the excitement. She smiled and yelled for her father like any bewildered child would do, and he had held her. Her mother must have reacted too, but that part comes to her much later. They felt natural, although pressure threatened to weigh her down whilst trying to make her father proud, as if it was her purpose, as if it was the only thing that mattered to her. The flames, burning and hot as they were, even more so than normal fire, had lifted her up. And when they burned so much, she would keep her cool because she was destined to be great. Her father said so. A little ache was nothing. She would have to take on much more than that. No one else's flames were blue, not that she recalls. They were prettier than the red ones, and scarier. Everyone listened to her more, caved into her demands without her even having to use her sweet voice. But that's not all they did. They scared people away, and her father told her that it was fine, because she didn't need people if not to rule over them. She didn't need Mai or Tylee. Yet, when the flame had become too much for them to handle, they had become scared enough to leave her. Azula could plan months ahead, deflect the 4 elements at once, counter cities, and not even her grandfather could. But nothing could have prepared her for this. Control had kept them tied to her. Friendship was secondary until it wore off. And now she has nothing, not even a father to guide her. He had told her not to become as sentimental as her mother, and she wasn't. She was cold and precise and cruel to everyone, including herself. It got her there, locked up and half aware of this new, peaceful world. She has nothing, if not for the old memories and the voices and the vision that make her scream at nothing. Her hair is not perfect. Her face is not polished, and her clothes certainly don't do any good at reflecting her connection to royal family. She can't recognize herself, honestly. Not after the protege she had been raised to be. Not after being obsessed with perfection so long that it started to dictate her life. She can't even dress herself, which would have been 5 for a palace liver, but her lineage dissolved into nothing in this place, just like the lightning that she couldn't bring out of her due to her arms and feet being pushed so close together. But she felt the hotness rumble inside of her like a roaring beast anyway. Strangely, it hurts. Because to a bender, bending is like letting out breath. Keeping it in does nothing but tighten everything until the body aches and begs for the breath to be let out. And she pretends that the shiver and the trembling of her voice don't matter, that it doesn't harm her. The staff does not pay attention to her besides the lectures and beatings and mockings and shocks. She feels her mother's meek and gentle voice, almost as if she's afraid to speak, afraid of her, all throughout, which makes her lash out more, rinse and repeat. Her views are colorless, disgraces are not allowed color, gone is the rich red, synonymous with power, and in comes the eternal white that taints everything, save from one spot, the hurriedly made throne room near the entrance, where her bastard brother can remind her how much power he has over now, much like she used to do. She doesn't see him much at all, that brother of hers. The one who would call her mean and call her cruel, and mother always took his side because he was good. And he fed the turtles while she threw bread loaves at them. He got a knife with a hopeful inscription, and she got a stupid doll. He was horrible with fire. She was the best with it, but he was good, and she was not. She convinced their father to get him a ship when he left, and she watched as their uncle went with him. Good riddance. She'd grown to hate them, or at least she thought she had. She isn't really sure. All she knows is that their uncle had never tried to reach out to her the same way he did with Zuko. She doesn't know how that makes her feel. She thinks of her summer home when her body falls to the ground, because the floorboards are made a similar sound. The beach there held some good moments that she hadn't held tight enough. Zuko and their mother liked the awful plays, and Azula liked the fight scenes. She doesn't know what her father liked. Did he like her? He must have enjoyed something, although he seldom spoke to her of anything besides conquest and fire-bending forms and how she was his favorite. Was she still? She sees Ursa, out of the corner of her eye, softly speaking to her as if she hasn't called Azula a monster a dozen times in her head. She wonders if loving her can had really been impossible, if she was far gone enough to be kept here. Maybe she is. Maybe her mother's trying to talk to her, and Azula can't even cover her ears, so she yells at her instead. She doesn't deserve to be talked down to like this. Though she's already on the ground, it can't get much lower than this. Then she remembers how ATLA had blocked her chi, causing her to fall off her wheelchair. It hurt almost as much as when the girl had first done it, betraying Azula for a brother that wasn't even around long enough for her to get to know him. She could somehow justify my betrayal by addressing the unspoken affection she had for Zuko, but ATLA, it made no sense. She and Azula had known each other since childhood, and even then, Mai seems to be the only one who saw Zuko as something more than an easy target for a prank. Azula hated being wrong. Worst of all, he'd ended up winning, while she became victim to her own mind and the harsh teachings that shaped her to perfection. In her father's eye, at least. No one else made her feel as seen as he did. And now, she'd lost that too. She could only reminisce on the time in the palace garden and the cherry pits and the lightning and the silence that quietly killed her. Zuko didn't visit much because he could see how ugly and incomplete she was now. Beneath the makeup and the flames and the odors, everyone was still afraid of her. That's why she's restrained and dirty and hardly gets any sunlight, like a dying houseplant. Then, why did she fail? It must have been her mother. She must have secretly spoke to Zuko through secret letters and codes because he was the good son and could be saved still. Because Azula needed to go down and bring the badness with her. Ursa must be proud of her good boy. So she should hound his days instead of hers. Because Azula had never been her mother's girl. And that's it for this fic. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have. I don't see Azula-centered fics so often this time, so I really like this one. Also, it's the first fic that I'm doing from Glass and Garden, so I hope you also enjoyed it. Anyways, have a great night or day, and bye bye.